Now, as someone who reviews and recommends Netflix movies constantly here on this channel, I'll be the first to admit that more often than not, Netflix originals can be pretty disappointing. But in this video, I want to do something I've never done here on the channel before and focus on the most rewatchable Netflix original movies ever released. So if I look at Netflix as if it's my own personal DVD collection, these Netflix originals are the top shelf ones, the ones I would revisit the most often. Thanks to Surfshark for sponsoring this video. I'll tell you how you can watch even more Netflix using them, but for now we're going to start with my number 20 pick, which was a popular action flick, Extraction. Now, there is an Extraction 2 that was released just a few months ago, and I think it's quite good as well, but I am partial to the first one. And the reason it makes the list is it is an exceptional Netflix original action movie. Netflix produces a lot of mediocre action. In fact, it's rare for a Netflix action movie to stand out and seem somewhat special, and Extraction definitely does. It's not the only action movie on this list, but it features fancier camera work than you would typically get from a Netflix original movie. On top of it being just a brutal, all-out action movie that really, once it kicks off, doesn't quit. Like I said, there's a good mix of genres on this list, but my next pick is easily one of the more unusual picks on this list. It's titled I Care a Lot, and it stars Rosamund Pike as a real dragon of a woman who essentially fleeces elderly people from all of their savings. And she's quite good at it as well. So it's an upsetting premise, but her character is really lively and kind of fun to watch, even though she's doing these despicable things. And this one never went into a direction I was expecting. This doesn't really feel like something that could have been successful in theaters, but it also does not feel like a made-for-TV movie. It's very unique unto itself, and is one of the more surprising Netflix original movies I think I've ever seen. Now, Adam Sandler has made quite a few Netflix original movies. That's kind of his thing now, and some of them are quite funny. But the one I chose for this rewatchable list is one of the wackier ones. It's titled The Wrong Missy.
I screwed up so huge. Remember that crazy blind date I had?
Nothing you could ever do would disappoint me. I love you.
This whole time I thought I was texting my dream girl. I was texting that crazy girl.
To the best weekend ever.
Now, he actually does not star in this movie. I can't quite remember if he appears in it, but the star is David Spade, and it's easily the funniest thing I've seen him in probably decades. But Lauren Lapkus is Missy. She's the real star of the show. She is a wild woman in this movie, and it's really silly. This is not one I recommend for everyone, but if you just like goofy, wacky, Adam Sandler type comedies, I do think The Wrong Missy is the funniest one that they've released.
Oh! Oh my God! She's alive! Damn it!
Now, director Mike Flanagan has done some amazing horror movies. I've recommended a bunch of them on the channel here. He's also done some of the best horror series on Netflix. The Haunting of Hill House, Bly Manor, Midnight Mass, Fall of the House of Usher. He did all of that, but if we go back 7 years, he did a Netflix original movie based on a Stephen King novel, Gerald's Game. Now, this does deal with some very upsetting subject matter, so it's not really rewatchable in that sense. If you're turned off by it, it's going to be hard to put this one on for a second watch, but it's very well done. It's incredibly compelling, especially considering that Carla Gugino is on screen and alone for easily 90% of the movie. I've always loved her, but she does a great job of carrying this movie, and the story is incredibly compelling, and it's certainly one of the better made-for-TV Stephen King adaptations maybe ever. My next pick happens to be a creepy one as well. There's not a whole bunch of those on this list, but for my next pick, I went with another really bizarre one that surprised the hell out of me with The Perfection.
You know what you have to do.
Now, this one too deals with some upsetting subject matter, but man, was this a twisted movie that, again, never went in a direction that I was expecting. Even though they show you something wild that happens mid-movie right at the beginning, this one got big points for me just for being totally original. It doesn't feel like any other Netflix original movies I've seen. It's kind of a horror movie, but also just kind of a twisted mystery thriller. It's never too off-putting or too frightening, but again, hits you over the head with some wild surprises that are set up pretty expertly, especially for a lower budget movie like this. This is a cool flick if you're just looking for something completely unusual. It's, again, unlike anything else I can think of. Now, my next pick made this list only because of who stars in it, because I can watch them and rewatch them in almost everything. They have done some bad movies I don't care to rewatch, but I love Woody Harrelson and Kevin Costner both in The Highwaymen.
How many bullets you got in you?
16, I think.
Might be good to have a doctor look at you sometime.
Might be good to have a doctor look at you sometime.
I ain't got no bullets in me.
Because I was covering you.
This is actually the story of the capture of Bonnie and Clyde. Now, you do see people portraying Bonnie and Clyde multiple times in the movie, but it's mostly about the Texas Marshals. And what I loved so much about this movie, in addition to just their fantastic performances, is you get to see what law enforcement was like during that time period. To hunt down criminals as ruthless and as motivated as Bonnie and Clyde, it was a pretty difficult task. They didn't have a whole lot of resources at their disposal, and the movie does a great job of showcasing all of that. It's a little bit old-fashioned as well, but in a really appropriate way for this story, and again, it's just a fantastic movie with Woody Harrelson and Kevin Costner. Now, next up, we've got another one with some crime, some guns, a killer cast. I thought it was fantastic, but for some reason, some people didn't love Triple Frontier. Now, right off the bat, I really love the cast for this movie. You've got Ben Affleck, Oscar Isaac, Charlie Hunnam, Garrett Hedlund, who I've loved in almost everything he's done, and Pedro Pascal, all in the same movie. I'm a sucker for heist movies, and as someone who has consumed a lot of heist movies, I loved that Triple Frontier, again, just didn't look or feel like a typical heist movie. I can see where some people didn't love where this one ended up, but I still found it to be an exceptional heist flick that felt really grounded and realistic as well, and it also takes place somewhere I've never seen a heist flick take place. Now, while there's a couple of creepy movies on this list, there's only one true blue horror movie. It is titled The Ritual. Now, this one too has some surprises. I'm not going to spoil any of them here in this review, but I loved where this one ended up. It shocked the hell out of me, and I thought it was just a bonkers yet incredibly fantastic way for this movie to end. That said, it is a slow build-up and there's a lot of mystery, and all of that stuff was fantastic as well. Another one that just surprised the hell out of me several times, but it's also got this creep-out factor that just gets into your bones. I feel like a lot of Netflix original horror movies are either too slow-paced or they're just packed with jump scares and they never really find a happy medium. The Ritual is damn near perfect, in my opinion. Okay, next up, I've got a Western that I not only think is the coolest Western Netflix has ever put out, it's also just kind of one of the slickest, coolest productions they've made, The Harder They Fall. Now, it looks like you're not going to see Jonathan Majors in anything ever again. He's one of the leads of the movie, but you've also got a great role from Idris Elba, Lakeith Stanfield, Zazie Beetz. You've also got an amazing role from Dion Cole, which I did not see coming. I mean, just a stacked cast, and the movie looks and feels kind of like a musical, the way that all the sets and costumes are done. It's not, there's no musical numbers or anything, but it's got this lively, almost Quentin Tarantino look and feel to it, and the banter in this movie is fantastic. I mean, the dialogue and stuff's good at times, but when characters are just sort of riffing and sort of talking shit to each other, the movie's really pretty fantastic. It does not feel like a typical Western, but that's also kind of what I love about it. I've seen plenty of Westerns in my life, and it's surprising to see one this unusual that I liked this much. That probably hasn't happened to me since I saw The Good, the Bad, and the Weird. And then we're gonna round out my bottom 10 with a visual stunner, just a total gem of a Netflix original movie titled Athena. This movie basically revolves around an escalating riot in these housing projects in France. But the way it was filmed is as if it's one long shot. I think there's a couple of transitions where time jumps ahead, but for the most part, this movie is a collection of very long takes, and they are all breathtaking. There's also a core story of these two brothers fighting kind of on different sides of this riot, and it's very well told. It does all take place in relatively one location, but you follow multiple characters, and it's got a lot of meat on the bone. The cameraman is almost a character in the movie, the way that the camera pans around. It's a really slick experience that's much more cinematic than most Netflix original movies. Another reason Athena earned a spot on this list. Now, I said I had another couple of comedies on the list, not many, but there's technically two. My next one made me laugh easily the most out of maybe any Netflix original movie I've ever seen. It's titled The Package.
Sean, let's go.
Yeah.
What's your problem?
Sean, do you have a boner? What? I don't have a bony.
Did you just fart?
No, it's a seat.
Oh my God, do you have the farts and a boner?
I don't have the farts or a boner.
One of those is definitely a lie.
Now, this movie is for people who like crude humor. It's about a group of teenagers that go on a camping trip, and one of them gets a little goofy with a knife and accidentally cuts his penis off. He's medevaced to the hospital, but when his friends find it on the ground, it now becomes a race to get it back to him so they can reattach it. So it's a goofy premise. It's actually from the creators of Workaholics. So if you love that brand of humor, you are going to absolutely love The Package. If you don't, steer far away from this one, but they've really stopped putting movies like this in theaters, and Netflix produced, I think, a pretty decent one here.
It was just supposed to be camping.
Now, my next pick is one that definitely deserved a sequel. I don't know what happened. The movie was popular. The movie set up that it was going to have a sequel, and they've just yet to deliver on a sequel for Polar. Now, in this movie, Mads Mikkelsen plays a hitman. This has got John Wick vibes all day. If anything, it's maybe a little bit slower paced than something like that, but it's got some fantastic action sequences in it that, again, are full of surprises. Mads Mikkelsen, even though he's playing kind of a quiet man character here, he's always fun to watch. And even though the movie's brutal, it's also kind of lively and colorful. There's actually a little more pizzazz to this thing than you might expect. And I think that's because it is based on a graphic novel, but this was a pretty cool action flick. Now, even though we did not get a sequel, there is one in pre-production. It's titled The Black Kaiser. So far, it's just Mads Mikkelsen and Vanessa Hudgens on the cast, which means they haven't really started anything. It's totally possible we never get that movie, but there's one loosely in the works. My next pick comes from Spain. It's a wild one, but just so interesting. I've seen it at least twice, maybe 3 times. The Platform. In this movie, a man wakes up in a cell with one other man and quickly learns that he's essentially in this stack of cells. Every day, they're fed by this platform that lowers, and it's covered with a banquet of food. The catch is you're left with whatever the people above you didn't eat. So the metaphor here is so on the nose, you get it right away, but then the platform does a great job of examining it deeper and deeper. Literally, you go deeper and deeper with this movie. Ultimately, I don't know that I quite understood everything with this one. It got so wild and sort of cerebral. But I loved that, and even more than that, I loved the entire journey to get there. It really is one of the more interesting and unusual sci-fi Netflix movies. The Platform is Spanish language. They've got a good dubbed version if you don't do subtitles, but I'm telling you, this is a wild one if you haven't seen it yet. But then we've got kind of another comedy. At least it's got some comical elements to it, and it was directed by the Coen brothers. The Ballad of Buster Scruggs. Now, I will admit, this one was a little bit of a disappointment to me, but that happens a lot with the Coen brothers because I love their movies so much. If I end up not absolutely loving one right off the bat, it's somehow a disappointment. Yet, The Ballad of Buster Scruggs is an amazing anthology flick. While I don't love every single story in it, there are a couple that I just adore. I thought the opening sequence with Buster Scruggs, played by Tim Blake Nelson, was fantastic. He did an amazing job of depicting like the glorification of the Old West. And then the one with Tom Waits, I'm a big Tom Waits fan, and to see him do this old prospector thing was really cool, and I loved that story. Essentially a collection of really fantastic short films from the Coen brothers, and what makes it so great and rewatchable is everyone seems to have their own favorite, so you could just rewatch your favorite portion, but really the full movie is well worth revisiting. And then it just so happens that my 2 favorite Netflix original science fiction movies ended up back-to-back on this list, my next pick being Spectral.
There's no limit to how far they can spread. Unless we stop them.
Now, this is a PG-13 action movie thriller. It's kind of by the book. In fact, had I seen this in theaters, I would have liked it, but maybe wouldn't have loved it. Yet this one came out before Netflix was really doing a lot of Netflix original movies, and I was kind of blown away by how fantastic it was, and I'm surprised this one didn't gain a bigger following, but honestly, it came out at a time where they weren't marketing things very much in terms of Netflix originals, and this is one that I think should have done much better. It is a mystery movie. There's a little bit of a Sherlock Holmes, if not kind of a Scooby-Doo vibe to it at times, but it's also a pretty badass military movie. It looks like Black Hawk Down, again with this somewhat of a Scooby-Doo type plot. And then the other one that blew me away was What Happened to Monday. Get ready, this one's kind of a long one, but Noomi Rapace plays a group of septuplets. She's playing all these different characters, they're all unique, and they live in this futuristic world where the birth rate is reduced to 1. You're not allowed to have more than one child. Willem Dafoe plays their father, who decides to hide them. Sorry, this one needs a good bit of setup. They're each named after one day of the week, and when Monday doesn't come home one day, the other girls have to figure out what happened to her. This actually reminded me a little bit of movies like The Matrix or Leon the Professional, but ends up being a really epic story. Like, it keeps going, and there's a lot of meat on the bone with What Happened to Monday. Not just good performances and an interesting setup and some decent action. It's actually a solid flick that's well worth watching. The runtime's over 2 hours, yet the movie earns it as well. Now keep in mind, these are what I consider to be the most rewatchable movies, meaning there's plenty more that I thought were excellent, and that's what I do here on the channel. I recommend a ton of Netflix movies, as well as movies available on all these other streaming platforms. But if you like getting movie recommendations like this, consider clicking the subscribe button, maybe even the thumbs up icon. That way the algorithm knows to recommend videos like this to you in the future. Alright, I mentioned that Extraction was a pretty brutal movie, but my next pick, it is a Netflix original, and it makes Extraction look like Sesame Street. The Night Comes For Us is from some of the same producers as The Raid, and is way more brutal than even that movie. That's right, it's a martial arts movie, but my goodness, is it unique in the sense that the violence is so raw and real. They're using like horror movie makeup effects in this to make the violence even more extreme. The fight choreography is incredible, but it just is a relentless movie. I would say it takes maybe 20-30 minutes for it to really pop off, and once it does, it is this insane collection of action sequences that are all done to the nines. If you like brutal martial arts movies, make The Night Comes For Us the next movie you watch. And then I teased that I've got another comedy on the list, and it's one of my favorite Netflix original movies they've ever released, which is why it made my number 3 spot. Dolemite Is My Name.
Do you know karate?
No, but I'm a fast learner. I can learn how to chop me a motherfucker.
Now this one actually had a lot of hype because it's kind of like Eddie Murphy's return to movies. He hadn't really been doing much, and I was not expecting much. I mean, I had seen the first Dolemite movie, I like that stuff, it's kind of cool and interesting, but never would have thought that a movie about the making of a B-level movie like that could have been so good. Eddie Murphy is fantastic in it. This is one of my favorite characters he's ever played. The supporting cast is amazing, particularly Wesley Snipes. It's one of my favorite characters he's ever played, and I'm a Wesley Snipes fan. But on top of all of that, it's a beautiful movie about making movies. And not just that, it's got this positive attitude. I mean, Eddie Murphy's character is just driven, wants to make fun, creative stuff for people. It's something I really identified with, and I've not really seen it depicted in a movie the way that Dolemite Is My Name did. They made it just seem like such a fun way to live your life, making it an unusually positive movie. We really should have more movies like this on the market. And I'm saying that as a fan of brutal action movies and disturbing movies. I like that stuff. But we don't have that many adult movies with this positive of a message, and I loved this movie for that. I say all that to go to my next pick, a David Fincher flick that is very dark and morbid, but I told you I like that stuff. And I happen to think The Killer is way more rewatchable than people gave it credit for. Now, on its face, I can understand why some people were maybe disappointed with this. If you're a fan of David Fincher, this feels like kind of a shallow effort for him. It feels like just another assassin movie, and it is that on the surface. This is actually based on a graphic novel series, but I guarantee you, when you rewatch this movie, you will pick up on so many little, minute details in every single scene. It's an incredibly well thought out movie. It's a very stripped down, bare bones type of a setup. Ultimately, I think I like the first half better than the second, but still, David Fincher layered this thing up in an expert fashion. I love his filmmaking style, love Michael Fassbender, and I think some of the details put into this movie make it highly rewatchable. So after gushing about the killer like that, what could possibly be number one? It's actually one of the most award-winning movies they've ever put out, and I still happen to think it's very rewatchable. All Quiet on the Western Front. Now, Netflix makes a lot of fantastic World War II content. I recommend a lot of it here on the channel. All Quiet on the Western Front takes place in World War I. It's based on an old book. In fact, there was a movie in the 30s that depicted all of this, and it's still an excellent flick. Yet, this new one somehow managed to be even better. Now, it mainly managed to be better because it's modern filmmaking techniques. It just looks better. It's a much more epic presentation, but it does not fall flat. It respects the original source material. It conveys all of the points about war extremely well. It does not feel like a made-for-TV movie in any way, shape, or form. In fact, I was a big fan of 1917. I think that's just an amazing movie in a lot of different ways. I think I like All Quiet on the Western Front even better as a recently released World War I flick. But that is the list. Don't forget to go check out the Surfshark link in the description to get that discount. But I will keep making these videos as long as you keep watching them. Thanks for checking out this Netflix episode, and you will see me on the next one.